In this section, we're going to take a look at properties of real numbers. And what these properties let us do is it'll help us simplify expressions. It'll also eventually help us solve equations. So let's start with the commutative property. So the commutative property works with addition and multiplication, and it lets us rearrange the values. So for addition, this would be that a plus b is the same exact thing as b plus a. So if I've written down 1 plus 2, I could rewrite it if I need to as 2 plus 1. Both of those are equal to 3, no problem there. Where it also shows up is with multiplication. So a times b is the same thing as b times a. So if you have multiplication, you can rearrange things. So for example, 2 times 3, which is 6, is the same thing as 3 times 2. And you can do this with a whole string of values. So say we have a 2 times a negative 5 times a 3 times 4. We could rearrange this any way that we wanted to. So we could have that like negative 5 up front, then we could go 3, then 2, then 4, however we want to rearrange it, as long as we keep all of the same values in there. And then just to emphasize, only with addition and multiplication can we do this. With subtraction, order is important. With division, order is important. But with addition and multiplication, we can move things around. The distributive property. So if we have a value multiplying, and inside the parentheses we have a binomial, or we have addition of two values, like this. The distributive property tells us that that value of a has to multiply with everything in the parentheses, so it needs to distribute to each piece in the parentheses. So what that would look like is that a would be multiplying with b, and then we would have that addition, and a would be multiplying with c. So that value that was outside of the parentheses ends up multiplying with everything inside. And it doesn't have to be two pieces. We could have 3 values, 10 values in there, all adding together. What's important is that the value that's multiplying outside has to go to each and every piece. Another thing that's important here is the fact that that's addition there. Subtraction would also work, but it's only when you see addition or subtraction in the parentheses that we would distribute through. So for example, if we were taking 3 times x plus 2, what we need to do is distribute that 3 in so that 3 would multiply with x, plus 3 times 2, which is 6. So absolutely everything got multiplied by 3 inside the parentheses. All right, then our last piece here is the order of operations. And our order of operations is going to go P, E, M, and D, A, and S. So previously, you've probably learned PEMDAS for your order of operations, which is absolutely correct. I just like to write it in this way because we actually take care of multiplication and division at the same time. Same thing with addition and subtraction. So the first part is parentheses. That's what the P stands for. But really, I'd want to open this up to any grouping symbols. So different grouping symbols could be, parentheses is definitely one. You could have different forms of parentheses, like different types of brackets. Absolute value symbols would group things together, so we'd want to simplify inside of the absolute value first. Something else is kind of a grouping symbol would be the division bar. So if you have a division and something in the numerator, something in the denominator, even if these parentheses aren't drawn, they're technically there. You'd want to simplify that numerator completely, simplify that denominator completely, and then you could simplify. So those are our grouping symbols. So we start there. And then E is for exponents. So after we simplify what's inside of the grouping symbols, we go to exponents, and then we can start working on multiplication and division. And we look at these at the same time. And what you'll do is, if you have multiple values that are multiplying and dividing together, we read from left to right. So we go left to right of simplifying down. And then same thing with addition, subtraction. we will, if there's multiple values adding and subtracting together, we go from left to right. Okay, so with those different properties, let's look at simplifying some expressions here. And with these, I'm going to go into a lot of detail and steps with these. You may be able to simplify these in a single step. That is fantastic, but just for the sake of this being review, and in case you need a good refresher of these, I'm going to be kind of long and tedious with these, hoping that that helps you out. All right, so something to notice is that these are all expressions, which with expressions, all we can do is just simplify, which means working through this PEMDAS, this order of operations, as much as we can, and then we'll end up at some stopping point. As compared to equations, so equations would have something like equals x or something like that. Like it would be something to solve for. So they're solving equations, which will have the equal sign, and then they're simplifying expressions, which is what we're focusing on right now. All right, so following my order of operations, I'm going to start with that 3 plus 4 in there because that's my parentheses. So I'm going to have 4 minus 1 minus a positive 7. And then all I have is subtraction, so I'm going to go from left to right. So 4 minus 1 first, and then 3 minus 7, which is a negative 4. All right, with this one, lots of parentheses. So we have this overall parentheses, so I want to simplify what's inside of there. Let's see, I'm going to just copy everything down. That negative 1 with parentheses, this first value, nothing to do there. That just stays negative 1. Here we have subtraction of a negative, which makes it a positive 1. And then we have that exponent of 2 on the outside. I'm going to keep, I'm going to highlight, keep simplifying the parentheses there. So 1 minus negative 1 plus 1 will be 0. So we're going to square that. Then our parentheses are all simplified, so now we're going to go to the exponent. So 0 squared is just 0. And 1 minus 0 is just 1. So we end up there following our order of operations. All right, a few more examples here. They're going to get trickier and trickier as we go on. So starting with our parentheses, that 8 minus 2, so we have 5 plus 2, and then in parentheses 6 plus 4. Take care of that multiplication. And then lots of addition there, so we're going to add from left to right. So 17 plus 4, we're at 21. Now, a common mistake that comes up with this scenario is students like to add that 5 plus 2 first, because you get used to this reading from left to right. But before you do anything from left to right, and really before you do any addition and subtraction, gotta make sure you've finished any grouping symbols, any exponents, any multiplication, division. Addition, subtraction is the last thing we want to do. So we do take care of subtraction first here, but it's under the parameters of that parentheses. So simplify that first, and then after that multiplication, then we can add them together. So just be very careful of that. All right, all sorts of things going on here. No parentheses, but I have an exponent there. So I'm going to leave everything else the same. But 5 squared is 25 times 2. And then this one has division and multiplication. And we take care of those at the same time, reading from left to right. So I'm going to take care of that 25 divided by 25 first, which is 1, times 2, which is 2. All right, then to finish up with some good long ones here. And if it helps, another way of working with simplifying expressions like these is if you see addition and subtraction, those separate expressions into things called terms. So you can see, like, we have this term of 20, we have this term of 4, and then we have this term of 4 squared divided by 2 times 4. And if that helps, you could think of simplifying each of these individually, which with those first two, there's nothing to do, but then we have work to do here before we can do any of that addition and subtraction. So if you've learned this before, or you like this kind of visual of separating the terms by addition, subtraction, you don't want to add or subtract at all until the very end, but we'll have 20 plus 4 and then minus whatever that simplifies to. So you can treat addition, subtraction as separation of terms if that helps. All right, no parentheses, but we have an exponent there. So I'm going to keep that 20 plus 4 minus 4 squared is 16 divided by 2 times 4. Multiplication, division at the same time, reading from left to right. We'll take care of that 16 divided by 2 first, which is, my pen will start working again. There we go. Minus 8 times 4. And then we still have multiplication to do. So we'll have that 20 plus 4 minus 32. So then reading from left to right, 24 minus 32 for a negative 8. All right, last one here with some layers of parentheses, but we want to start by looking at the most inner layer of parentheses. So we have that 23 minus 3 cubed. So I want to take care of that exponent. I'm going to leave everything else the same. Again, there are ways to simplify doing multiple steps at the same time. I'm just going the long route here, so that's a 27. I'm going to keep simplifying the parentheses there. So negative 4 squared minus 5, 9 minus a negative 4, which is the same thing as 9 plus 4. So that'll be a 13. And then once my parentheses are all simplified, I'm going to go to that exponent. So this will be a negative 16, which, as a reminder, let's do some side work here. The difference between 4 squared, negative 4 squared, and quantity negative 4 squared. So 4 squared is 16. If you have a negative here, really the only thing that's being squared is just the 4. It's like having a negative 1 times 4 squared. So with this, you keep that negative out front, and then 4 squared is 16. If you want it to end up positive, you have to have the parentheses, because then what the square is affecting is everything in the parentheses. So this would be the same thing as a negative 4 times a negative 4, which would be a positive 16. So when you have exponents with negatives, just be really careful of, are there parentheses or not? Okay, so that leaves us with negative 16 because we don't have parentheses. And then we have negative 5 times 13. Let's take care of that multiplication there. I'm just going to use a quick calculator to help out. 5 times 13 is 65. So negative 16 minus 65 should be a big old negative number. Let's see, 70, 81. And actually, while I have the calculator there, we can check our answers with these. And I'm going to be using the Desmos Scientific Calculator in this course. And what I like is that it'll type it up just as we have it written there. So like negative 4 squared minus 5, use those brackets, 9 minus, parentheses, 23 minus 3 cubed, close those parentheses, close those brackets, and actually it didn't like those brackets. So let's use just a second layer of parentheses there. There we go, and there we can see we got our negative 81. So following our order of operations, we can get to that same answer, and you can check it with the calculator.